Chapter 7 Celebration Today. In exploring the story of Celebration's past, I knew I would eventually have to hop on a plane and see the current state of the town, because Celebration is alive and well, and its story is still unfolding every day. And there are a number of things that have happened in Celebration after Disney sold the town center that are worth diving into. First, let's talk about the state of the community. Celebration was sold as a place where the close-knit community makeup of pre-World War II America was re-established. The question is that still the case? From what I could tell, yes. On my first day in Celebration, they were holding their weekly farmers market, a tradition held since the beginning of the town. I walked through and could see a blend of both residents and tourists exploring the market. I walked around the lake and saw residents both young and old sitting on benches, taking in the scenery. The restaurants on Front Street always seemed to be busy, and I myself enjoyed some chocolate I got from Kilwin's ice cream shop and sat next to the water fountain. That's not to say that things haven't changed since Celebration was founded. Most of the people who were there in the early days seem to have moved on. In Andrew Ross's book, Sunbelt Blues, he explores the housing crisis in America by returning to Osceola County and interviewing those living in motels and on the streets. One couple Andrew ran into at one of the motels were early residents at Celebration, but due to the recession were forced to leave the town. After the recession, prices have generally risen in Celebration, and many companies have bought and rented out homes. This is a far cry from the early days, where generally rentals were exclusively apartments, and homes were usually owned. Celebration is a great case study for a larger wealth disparity in the United States, one clearly visible as soon as you drive outside of the community. The area of Osceola surrounding the town is touristy, and while there are nicer areas and shopping centers, much of it is a bit run down. Celebration was always a bit of a bubble, shielded away from the rest of Osceola, and many of the run-down buildings have been there since the town's founding. But it's hard to point the blame solely at a place like Celebration. After all, the wealth gap in America is a problem found in almost every major city. In the early years, Disney had talked about creating low-income housing to truly make Celebration into the ultimate mixed-income community. They opted instead to send funds to programs supporting low-income residents in Osceola, and made Celebration a middle to upper-class community. And while this is increasingly unlikely to ever change in Celebration itself, Disney recently announced an affordable housing initiative in neighboring Orange County. I took a quick detour up the highway and visited a patch of land Disney has offered for low-income housing. Like Celebration, this land and the area surrounding used to be part of the Reedy Creek District, but was de-annexed to prevent residents from gaining voting rights in Disney's areas. Notably, Disney themselves are not planning to develop the housing. Rather, they've partnered with the Michaels Corporation to handle construction and operation. Opposing voices in the community have raised concerns about the development, one issue being a lack of schools in the area. But if Celebration scared Disney away from one thing, it would probably be building schools. The land itself seems to be a leftover patch of farmland, with a dilapidated barn still sitting on the property. So hopefully this development will allow low-income residents to find stable housing in the region, and more developments like it will be established soon. But back to Celebration itself, because in recent years there have been headlines about the town becoming run down as well, with mold and decay allegedly eating away at the town center. These stories have circulated after the area was sold to Lexan Capital. When Lexan took over the town center, shop owners were assured that the only difference would be a new name on the rent bill. But this has not really been the case. When Lexan bought the property, Disney offered them $750,000 to use for maintenance and repair of the area, but the company declined. Instead, they quickly sold 2 parking lots for condo development, turned some of the more affordable rentals into condos for sale, and later refinanced the town, saddling it with debt so the company could profit as much as possible. Meanwhile, the town has reportedly sunk further into decay, with Lexan not seeming to care enough to do anything until they absolutely need to. As well as that, Disney retains the ability to force Lexan to make those repairs through representatives on Celebration's non-commercial owners board, but they have seemingly yet to do so. Going into Celebration, I had planned to highlight these structural issues and call upon Lexan to do their job and maintain the town. But when I arrived, I was surprised to find that Celebration was beautiful. Really. I had read all about how nice the town was, how unique and impressive the architecture was, and how nice the community was. And honestly, that all remains true. And the fact that I, as a tourist, see very few flaws in the town and its town center is great. But it's also not great, because if the structural problems and repairs needed are all behind the scenes, hidden behind a clean and shiny outer appearance, that means Lexan probably isn't going to do much about it. And that's a big problem. In purchasing the town center, Lexan assumed the responsibility of maintaining the buildings, and therefore the future of Celebration. And it doesn't matter if a tourist like me can readily see the problems. If the problems exist, then it's their responsibility to fix them. And I sincerely hope they do. Now, we've looked at the state of the community, the town center, and the buildings within. Next, let's briefly focus on one of those buildings, the movie theater. Designed by Cesar Pelli, it remains a staple of the town's architecture, with its twin spires piercing the town's skyline. But unfortunately, in December 2010, it closed its doors. And to this day, the iconic theater sits in the center of the town unused. Why did this happen? Well, it was rented and operated by AMC since the town's beginning, known as AMC Celebration 2. Towards the end of the theater's operation, it struggled to attract customers, as seen in these photos from its final day of operation. The closure of the theater was quiet and received little fanfare. Despite its closure, however, AMC continued to rent the location because it was cheaper for them to pay the rent than to operate it. And since they have a nearby location in Disney Springs, they didn't want another company to take over and detract from their sales. That is, until the pandemic hit theaters hard, and AMC was forced to cut costs severely. Because of this, in 2020, they stopped paying rent to the building. No other company or individual has taken over the building yet, but there is a hope from many in the community that this iconic building will one day open its doors again. Next, let's talk about the state of Disney's involvement in the town. Now, hold on, you're probably asking yourself. The last chapter was all about how Disney left Celebration. Well, that's definitely true in a sense. Disney sold the town center, leaving maintenance and upkeep to Lexan. Disney also left the Homeowners Association, meaning they are no longer involved with maintaining the appearance of houses. Ever since their name came off the water tower, they've been wanting to distance themselves from the project. And the perception from most of the people I've talked to is that Disney packed up and left the town. Until I talked to Andrew Ross.
What was not typical about Celebration was that the company retained a veto vote as part of the governance structure. That even after all of the governance boards have been turned over to residents, the corporation can still exercise a veto. That's very unusual. The perception that Disney has left the town a long time ago is a flawed perception. Company still owes chunks of land. I mean, the business plan always was to sell off the land at the highest market value at the right time. And that continues to be the case, but they still own little chunks of land, and especially a large chunk of land that lies to the west of the I-4 corridor, which currently is undeveloped. They still control the commercial the commercial governance board, and effectively they have control over the joint board. Yeah, the company has sort of withdrawn a lot of its imagistic or rhetorical association with the town, but its property stake is still considerable.
My perception had always been that this is Celebration, but it turns out that's only a portion of it. On the other side of the I-4 freeway, this large swath of land is also a part of Celebration, and it is massive. Over 1,000 acres of land, about 2/3 the size of what is developed in the town. Disney has had little areas of commercial land in Celebration for years that they have recently begun to sell off. But at time of recording, they have yet to sell this massive patch of land. Now, their ownership of the land means a couple of things. First, it means they can be involved in the government, according to the rules they outlined when the town was founded. As long as they own more than 10% of the land in Celebration, they're allowed representation on governmental boards in the town, of which there are many. And of course, even if they sell that land, they still retain veto power over any decisions made. Second, it means that more than a third of Celebration has yet to be developed into anything. Most of the land is just a giant forest, and it would be expensive to develop, so it may not be used for anything, at least not for a while. However, their ownership of the land means they are the biggest non-residential landowner, and allows them sway over CNOA, the Non-Residential Owners Board. So by holding onto this land, they can exercise their authority over Lexington. That and the price tag of development are probably the reasons Disney is holding onto the land, and how they are quietly still connected to the town. Even if the land is ever developed, it's on the other side of the freeway, and would likely be seen as separate from the town, even if it would technically still be a part of Celebration. But if Disney ever decided to develop it, and therefore become more involved in the town once again, it would be interesting to see the reactions of residents. After all, Disney has spiritually left the town, and the residents have continued the story of Celebration on their own. So for Disney to reinsert themselves into that story would likely be controversial to those living there. Now, we've covered the community, Lexington, the state of the town center, the movie theater, and Disney's continued involvement. Before we go, let's talk about one final important part of Celebration: its legacy. It's an idea that has persisted all throughout this story, from Walt's obsession with Epcot and designing the future, to Celebration recapturing the community structures of the past. Celebration was sold as a continuation of Epcot, as a final chapter in the history of Walt's final project. But Celebration has its own story, and its own legacy as well, carried on by the residents themselves. I first noticed this in talking to Jackie Flanigan. Jackie highlighted how despite the failure of the original Celebration school, many of its ideas and philosophies made their way into a number of the nearby schools. These included Montessori Academy of Celebration, Neo City Academy, and the Diocese of Orlando.
Again, the influence of the Celebration school design was so prevalent that when I went to work at the diocese years later, I remember having a meeting. We were doing some work on a school, and we went to a meeting with this architectural firm, and they were selling us on, because they were presenting a proposal for some building that they wanted to do for the diocese schools. And they start showing this, and I'm sitting around this big table, and the architects are going through, and they've got these pictures, and they're showing their portfolio. And I looked up and I went, that was my classroom. And the guy looked at me and he's like, what? And I said, that's upper 3 in Celebration school. And it's like that they use that to pitch the way schools should be. I found fascinating.
More than just schooling, the design philosophy of Peter Rummell and his team, as well as the architecture and layout of the town, served as inspiration for a handful of more recent developments. 2 former members of TCC, Charles Adams and Don Killeran, went on to found Celebration Associates, which worked with developers to create a pattern book and design philosophy for master plan communities around the world. As well as that, Brent Harrington, Celebration's first town manager, went on to work as president and CEO of DMB Development, taking his experiences in Celebration and using them in further developments around the country. And as for Disney, after all those years of avoiding the Epcot project, they had finally built a town that kept some of the spirit of Walt's original plan. Celebration was no utopian society, but it was a town built with community at the forefront. And yet, it was far more difficult than they had probably ever anticipated. Celebration had earned them more grief from the press than anything else. And so, while it may have been a success in the long run, Disney distanced themselves from community development. They've been known to build the occasional neighborhood from time to time, but Celebration served as their first and last foray into building communities. Except that is about to change.
We're here in Rancho Mirage to celebrate the groundbreaking of Cotino, our first story living by Disney community.
Together we mark the ground upon which Cotino will be built.
And in addition to residential homes, this development is also expected to host a hotel and a range of shopping, dining, entertainment, and leisure activities, as well as a grand oasis featuring clear turquoise waters with crystal lagoons technology.
Cotino is a new community currently being developed by Disney in partnership with Brent Harrington's DMB Associates. It doubles as both a master plan community and mini vacation destination, with offerings including a resort hotel and town center. It will be located in Rancho Mirage, which is near Palm Springs in the California desert. Cotino will have parks and walking trails like Celebration, and even has a lagoon. In fact, if you look at the map, Cotino's master plan is pretty similar to Celebration's. More recently, Disney announced a similar planned community located just outside of Raleigh, North Carolina, called Asteria. Less details are known about this project, as construction has yet to begin and sales probably won't open until 2027. Although there will be houses available for people of all ages, at least some of the residential offerings in both Cotino and Asteria will be reserved for those 55 and older. This seems to indicate that Disney has learned a lot from the successes and failures of their Celebration project. Rather than try to create the next great community of mixed-income residents, Disney is interested in creating communities of a higher price point geared mainly towards retirees. They're not building schools, and they're not trying to reinvent the wheel with community planning. Their plan is to create a nice place to live and make a quick profit off the land sold, as well as generate continual income by charging residents and visitors membership fees for the community's clubhouse. They'll also charge visitors for beachside access to the lagoon for Cotino, providing more additional income. Both Cotino and Asteria are part of an initiative called Story Living, where Imagineers design communities with a Disney touch, meaning if these places are profitable, Disney is planning to make more communities. At the time of my interviews, Asteria had not been announced, but Cotino was in development, and most people I talked to had actually already heard about it. Since they had all been involved in Celebration in one way or another, I was interested to hear if they had any advice for Disney in terms of what they should take from the Celebration project and incorporate into Cotino.
I think that they've got to try and be new and different without being so avant-garde that they make people feel uncomfortable. People have got to feel like it's home, like it's a real place. People don't want to live in a theme park.
So Celebration, if it were started now, it would probably manifest itself differently than it did in 1994 from its beginnings then. And it'll be interesting to watch and see what they do in California. The California market's first very different than the market in Central Florida. So that in and of itself would suggest a different kind of product mix. It would manifest itself differently. People are different. The market's changed.
I'm not going to say don't build a school, because I believe that the heart of every community is its school. It should be. That we've lost that. Undercommit and over-deliver. That would be my advice. You can't sell something that may not exist. And if you're doing something really different, I don't should market it, because if it's that new and that innovative, you don't know that it's going to work.
So I have heard of it, and to answer your question directly, manage expectations. Don't oversell it, or don't let the people that are there selling it oversell it. Make sure that you have some overwatch in what's being said, because these people work on commission. They're going to tell you whatever you want to hear, and they're going to say whatever they need to say to make the sale, because that's their bottom line. And they need to, as a company, if they're going to do it again, they need to make sure that the people that are doing the selling are actually selling the reality of what they're building, and not the fantasy of what some want it to be.
Yeah, I noticed that. I was surprised that they would actually, I thought Celebration would be their first and last foray into residential development. My sense is that the one in California is not being designed as particularly mixed income community. It's fairly high end. So the more risky, I would say, the more risky features of the celebration blueprint, the mixed income part of it, the school, the public school that was at the heart of it. These are not going to be part of the plan for the new community.
So, in a sense, would you say that Celebration is the first and last time Disney has built a community?
I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to live in Celebration and write about it was that no one really built a new town in the U.S. since the 1960s. I mean, a town with everything, with all the features built in. We're not talking about subdivisions or master plan communities. This was designed as a town, coherent town. And it's not often that developers do that for very good reasons. You have to have very deep pockets to be able to do it. And Disney was able to finance it in that way. That is uncommon. So, again, yeah, there's a difference between building a master plan community and building a new town. New towns are very rare.
Well, it will be interesting to see what happens with all of the new communities Disney is planning down the line. At the end of the day, Celebration was a unique and singular project that was unlike anything the company had ever tried before, and is unlikely to be surpassed by any community they will ever create again. And maybe that's for the best, because Celebration deserves to be more than a footnote in a company's history, or a stepping stone to grander and more profitable community plans. It deserves to be remembered for more than its parallels to the final idea of a visionary creator. It deserves to be remembered as less than a utopia, and more than just nostalgia. Like any place, like any moment, its history is worth preserving, and its history is held by those who created it, those who contributed to it, and those who lived in it. Many of those who have come and gone over the years, but each added their own thread to the tapestry of Celebration's history. A tapestry that holds all the trials and triumphs, all the successes and failures, with threads held strong by the bonds of the community. A community built upon the belief that people could and should be neighborly to one another, living and growing together as one beautiful community. And that's all Celebration is, just a town built for its community. I've dedicated a year of my life to presenting the history and culture of Celebration, and I couldn't have done it without the help of a number of people who I'd like to thank. I'd first like to thank my family, who have been incredibly supportive throughout this whole production. Second, thank you to those who helped me with my research, and to those who took the time to do an interview with me. Thank you to Peter Rummell, Jerry Ray, Jackie Flanigan, Tom Vitale, Bob Rhodes, Rene Castillon, and a very special thanks to Andrew Ross, whose research was vital to the creation of this documentary. If you're interested in learning more about Celebration in Osceola County, I'd highly recommend checking out his books, The Celebration Chronicles and Sunbelt Blues. And to the people of Celebration, after years of negative press, I hope this documentary can serve as a fair account of your history and culture, and as a celebration of you and your community. And finally, if you took the time to watch this film, whether you watched the whole thing, 10 minutes, or just 2 seconds, a very special thanks to you. Thank you.